Welcome to Flexing the Future, the Entras podcast on the energy transition and flexibility. By us, Frank Allaerts,
Jens Batens,
and Jeroen van Vrachem. In this podcast, we'll discuss the impact of the energy transition on the flexibility of the industry in Belgium and in Europe.
Not among ourselves, of course. Alternatively, we'll ask true experts in the field to share their knowledge, insights and vision with you.
Welcome to Flexing the Future, the Entras podcast about energy transition and the role of flexibility in this process. Today we have Bert De Corte from Ineos Inovyn as our guest in our studio. Welcome, Bert.
Thank you.
We want to start off with a question immediately. So what is your personal view on the energy transition in the Belgian industry?
Well, let's start with the most difficult one. The energy transition is on its way. The end goal is clear, it's set, but there are some uncertainties on the way to get there. Let's see, during our talk, we will touch on a number of these, but it's all challenging times for industry.
Yeah, that sure is. Maybe can you give a short introduction on Ineos Inovyn and your current activities?
Yes. Ineos is a global chemical company. Ineos has, I have to be sure, 36 businesses, typically in chemical industry, but also some in sports and clothing. So that's a bit atypical in chemical industry, but nice. We have around 192 sites in 29 countries over the world. Myself, I'm active in Inovyn. It's the chloralkali and PVC division. Typically, we start our processes with electrolysis. For that, we use giant amounts of electricity. So we are probably one of the biggest energy consumers focused on electricity in Europe.
Right. So you're really a major consumer of electricity. So how do you see the future of the energy-intensive industry in Belgium and Europe then?
Again, not having a crystal ball, but the first thing is that there is a future. There is an existing asset base to produce. There are markets, there is a supply chain, consumers, a lot of know-how. The only thing that today we are looking for, we are missing, it's competitive feedstocks and competitive energy slash electricity. This being said, with all these elements available, we want to find a way to get access to be competitive again, and that's one of the major challenges.
Yeah. And just a question for clarification: if you say feedstocks, what kind of products do you then mean?
So feedstocks, it's ethylene, typically coming from naphtha or from the shale gas, ethane. So that's the start of the chain that we combine with electrolysis to start from salt, and salt is sourced in Europe. Yeah. Ethylene, for majority, is not. That's actually what is our starting point of the chain.
Yeah, all right. And so the feedstocks together with the cost of electricity is then the main challenge for industry.
Yeah. Currently, electricity is still generated for majority nuclear and fossil, around 65%. So there is a big development in renewables. We are fully in favor of that. Actually, the one issue we have for that is that our industry has been designed for baseload profiles. Yeah. The good thing, and that's making the link to flexibility. Yeah. The good thing is that renewables, when they are there are a lot, but there are periods when there are almost zero renewables. Looking into buffer/storage, batteries, hydrogen, developments ongoing, but not yet a full breakthrough. And then also overcapacity in industrial assets will be also part of the solution. But still, well, it's around, of course, the topic of this podcast about flexibility. That will be one of the answers. What we have to say, talking about really challenges, the challenge of time. I think we can say that typically the major investments in chemical industry in Europe were in the 60s, 70s. Yeah. Today it's 24. So let's say 60 years.
That's long.
With the European targets for energy reduction, let's say there is a big milestone, 2030, but also 2040, and then 10 years later to net zero. But we have around 15 years to redesign what we have developed in the 60 years before. So we will have to be 4 times quicker than in the past to make this change. That's a big challenge. Not only for the time, but also we have to find the cash to finance this whole transition at the moment where industry is not performing great.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then on top of that, we will need engineers, human people, people from finance to evaluate business cases, people in the logistics. So it has to be the full change. And at a certain moment, the war on talent, finding the right people to think, to be creative, will be also a challenge.
So it's the whole society that should adapt to the transition.
Yeah, in that case, we do see the basic one is just, okay, we need competitive energy. Once we have that, to get it all done will be another challenge.
Yeah. All right. And so for Inovyn then, regarding renewable energy, what do you have plans to develop this, or how do you see the future for your industry specifically?
Well, for us, our assets, if the electron is coming from a renewable power generation, a nuclear one, or a fossil fuel, a gas generation plant, our process doesn't see the difference. We do know that the future is green, or let's say CO2 free. It's a better description on that one.
Yeah.
And how do we see it? Well, we try to source competitive energy, and we go for a CO2 free energy mix in the future. And that's what we try to source.
Bert, if we zoom in on the cost of energy for industry, what are your insights on this topic?
Yeah. Well, in our industry, as already said, typically the cost of energy, it's not 1% of the total cost base, but it's 10, 20, 30, 40% for chemical industry in general. So it is a key differentiator. Looking to the USA, China, and then Europe, there is a factor 2-3 in the cost of energy. Of course, there is a global world, which is meaning import and export. If we want to be competitive one way or another, something has to be done on the cost of energy.
Yeah. And what trends do you expect? Do you think it will get more expensive, or that it will become better, or do you...
Well, the first trend, it will be more volatile. On the one hand, if I say volatile, some people or some views are that contracting everything in 5, 10, 20-year contracts long term is the solution to take out volatility. Mm-hmm. Of course, it is a solution, but it's also a big risk, because if you hit it wrong, you will be faced with a 20-year price level that is top end, and you're no longer competitive. So first of all, it's about volatility. It's about taking opportunities. There will be windows in time when renewables are cheap. Yeah, a lot of sun, a lot of wind. But at the same time, we think that still one thing is missing. It's to match the demand when there is no renewables generation. So that's a big question mark for us. What will be the technology that will fill the gap? Because we cannot operate an asset base on-off. It's not designed for that. And producing, solar is 10-15% of the year, wind 30-40%. We cannot produce with an asset base renewables only 30 or 40% of the time of the year at the best case. And then you come to interconnectors, storage, even other production technologies to try to go to this more or less baseload production profile.
Yeah. All right. And so this, let's say, technology to close the gap, is that something that you as the industry are closely following?
Yes, we are closely following, but at the same time, we are technology neutral as long as things are safe. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So if there are safe technologies, and there is a broad spectrum of interconnectors to get the hydro power from the north into the center of Europe, batteries, but costly, hydrogen promising under development. There is even nuclear. A lot of development in nuclear. And there is another one, which is, of course, flexibility. The production assets from chemical companies. On the other hand, the business case to, let's say, double the production capacity to meet, to get to the same production level based on renewables, but then operate only 40% of the time. Our sector is so capital intensive that the business cases for that will be, from what we see, really limited.
Yeah, that will be a really expensive investment to do.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but today, with the current investment cost, it's not yet possible.
All right. And what do you then expect from flexibility for your processes?
Well, flexibility. So first of all, flexibility is something that will be a competitive advantage if you are in the European market competing with European producers. If you're better in flexibility than others, there is an advantage. This being said, from what I see now, we will not invest in additional capacity and double our production capacity to meet the 40 or 30% availability of renewables. So we see it more like a top-up revenue where we can optimize with our existing asset base as a function of availability of renewables at certain moments of the year if the site is not running at max rate, because that's something we have to understand. Our chemical industry is often designed to, the ideal is producing in between 70 and 90%, so almost maximum. At the same time, limiting the potential for flexibility, of course.
Yeah. So it's only some part of a solution, but there's much more required and to close the gap of the energy transition, where we have where we're currently not having enough renewable energy, and I guess the availability of renewable energy at every moment, that's the main issue.
Yeah.
What do you think could the role of the government be in this story?
Well, of course, the government is one of the main actors in this story. Well, at a certain moment, the government takes its role as a facilitator. From an industry point of view, well, let's keep it simple. It's one of the things we are always in favor of, and try to bring this long-term, the end goal, but also don't forget the short term, because on the short term nowadays, industry in Europe is not having a great time. So don't forget the short term. For the government, it's about being pragmatic, I think. And for us, it's about being technology neutral. If it's CO2 emission free and it's safe, there are a number of cards to play. As mentioned, if it's about how to bring and connect to the northern Europe hydro power, if it's about batteries, hydrogen, flexibility, the nuclear developments, the answer will not be one technology, one way forward, but the combined one. So that's where we see that the government has to go to this, objectives for CO2 free with realistic targets and at the lowest cost without killing industry.
Yeah, and of course it's also a global play field. It's it's mainly, I guess, the European Union that should address these topics.
Yes, so that at least at European level, it's a level playing field. The beauty of Europe is that Europe comes with guidelines and rules, but then every country implements them. So it's still country specific.
Yeah.
But to have this, let's say, European level playing field, we are all going for the same goal, which is the net zero. And with all what I said, industry is a partner to get all this done.
Yeah. All right. Then if you look at the European target for CO2 reduction, how do you see this evolving?
Is evolving. I don't think that the target as such will be changed, because there is a clear goal for net zero, and everything is lined up for that. Still, there are a number of years to go. I don't know if one is thinking about the speed. What we see is that with the different crises, the targets have become always more ambitious. At the same time, now we are faced with industry that is having a less favorable, or in general, Europe a less favorable economical outlook. I don't know if there is something. It will not be about not going for net zero, but maybe the timeline to get there, or the intermediate objectives will be adapted. Difficult to see clear on that one. What we see coming, of course, it's everything on the ETS from the past. It has its merit. There has been a substantial reduction in emissions of CO2.
Yep.
For sure, if you look per ton of product, producing more with less CO2 emissions, so that's a good one. But now we see the CBAM coming in. Also,
maybe just explain a little bit what CBAM is.
Yeah, well, CBAM. So in Europe, we have in simple ways a tax on carbon emission. Yeah? We don't call it a tax, but it is a tax. So the CBAM is now to develop a similar mechanism to tax carbon emissions on import of chemicals and steel and other in Europe. It is only starting this year, like a couple of weeks ago. And it's actually to create a level playing field between European producers and other parts of the world. It's only starting now. There are some sectors that kick off, and then it will be rolled out more and more over the coming years.
But you see this as a way to help industry adapt while keeping its competitiveness.
Well, for import markets, the answer is yes. But at the same time, the CBAM is kicking in. But the carbon leakage support for industry in Europe is decreasing. So it does mean that we get less competitive for export markets. Let's see. There are a lot of discussions ongoing, but the pressure on exports will be considerable.
Can you already estimate what the impact of this CBAM will be for you, or is that too early?
Well, the first thing what we see today with CBAM, if you want to construct and you need to purchase a heat exchanger or a pump, there is a big administrative burden is the word to use. Is it because we are only getting to know the process today? It's really, it's as we speak, we are implementing, but it didn't get any easier. Again, in this one, keep it simple would be a great thing. So that's one, and also with the ongoing ETS reform, so the emission trading system in Europe. Well, also on that one, the carbon leakage protection is going down from what we see today. The number of obligations is increasing. Now linking carbon leakage support with energy reduction obligations. Well, the question is it not becoming too complex, too big? Because again, making the link to human resources, the number of people who have to understand, who have to implement, and who have to do it, finding them, paying them, it's not evident.
Yeah, so the let's say that the extent to which adaptation is required to be conform with all this legislation is huge.
Yes, yeah, and also if we make the link to somebody joining chemical industry today, probably half of his career or even more will be just about working around this transition. So also the mental state and the profile of people who have to lead this, who have to develop this, be creative, innovative, get it done, result oriented, and always it has to be at the lowest cost because we need to be competitive. It's a bit of rock and roll, if I may say.
Yeah. And maybe it's also motivating for a lot of people to be part of the change, I hope.
Well, let's hope. Maybe it's a good point because maybe that's one of the things in Europe. Europe does not have cheap raw material. The fossil stuff is coming from outside of Europe for majority. Energy, we're also not today in the best position. There are some opportunities. But we have created a future in Europe in the past by working, being creative. Sometimes, and it's a point of debate. We see in society that this boots on the ground, let's get it done, work hard. Work hard, play hard, but sometimes you see it's only play hard and not work hard. So we will need a generation of people, including myself, you, and a lot of people who see this, who just work and try to get it done.
Yeah. All right. Then, which trends and developments do you follow closely regarding the energy transition?
Yeah, as said, we try to see, we need to source, and typically it's around 1% of the electricity in Europe today. I'm not saying it will be 1% in the future, because with electrification, it might be that the electricity consumption is estimated to double, to triple. So what are we looking at? We look into what will be the electricity demand in domestic household for cars, electrification. We look in the alternatives, what is happening in storage, hydrogen batteries, how is the European grid developing, and then what are the alternative technologies to complement the renewables. Something that is more and more in the picture, and then although not homogeneous through Europe, it's nuclear. We are following the nuclear closely. Why? Because it has to be done, first of all, safe, so not to have any incident. But in nuclear, typically, it could be a great match with an industrial chemical complex, because it would be with all what is today fatal heat, just cooling down and remove the heat. But this could be a great heat source to decarbonize the heat demand from a chemical side. So nuclear might be combining the power generation with the heat generation and decarbonize both at the same time. So that's something we are also following. But at this moment, we are monitoring. No full conclusion can be made. That's clear.
All right. And regarding future developments, what do you expect from flexibility in industry?
Yeah, it's one of the cards to play, and it is and will be one of the cards. Purchasing electricity within the day, hedging positions. But then also what we have to see is that typically our asset base has been designed to run flat out at a stable rate.
Yeah.
Flexibility means going up and down
All the time.
one time a day, 2 times a day, but very much different from what we have been doing in the past. So to get our asset base really ready for flexibility will be one of the challenges. But also operating in markets where today, let's say, we optimize our planning and our planning processes based on demand of our end products, PVC, chloralkali. In the future and already today, there is another variable or parameter entering into our planning process. That's indeed the flexibility. Is it possible to generate more revenue by not producing than producing? But in a planning process, already one parameter, the demand for the end product, is a business decision and is not always easy.
No.
Entering flexibility is another degree of complexity. So also our teams, our asset base, our teams, everything needs to be ready to take this top-up revenue. But it's a transformation.
Yeah, and it's again this point of that. Let's say being better in technology will make us stronger.
Yeah.
All right.
Combined with the fact that if one day, in a couple of years, every domestic household will flex, so every dishwasher will switch on when the sun is shining or there is a lot of wind. Question is, but that's market. Will industrial flexibility be competitive with other types of flexibility?
Yeah.
But that's up to us to be competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also up to the future what will happen. We are now near the end of our podcast, Bert. Do you have a final message?
Well, a final message is there is a lot of change ongoing. Industry is not going through great times. The end goal is clear. It's net zero. How to get there is partially clear. Industry is a partner to get it done. That it will be a step by step, playing multiple cards, including flexibility, and then just be realistic and don't forget the short term. It's about the end goal, but also to go through the turbulent time we're heading now.
All right, and I especially remember your statement about that in Europe we are strong in technology, and that is one of the major points that will help us through it.
Let's get it done.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.